Hello, thank you for joining us today. I'm Bruce Goldstein with Farmworker Justice in Washington, D.C. Welcome to the Facebook program series, The State of Farm Workers in America in the COVID-19 Era. Farm workers have been designated essential workers to ensure our nation's food security during the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet their working and living conditions create grave risks to their health and economic status. These programs raise awareness about the serious challenges the pandemic imposes on farm workers and their family members each and every day. The series identifies impactful work and innovative ideas being carried out by Farmworker Justice and other organizations that represent and serve farm workers. So today, we're very, very fortunate to have a special guest, Edward James Olmos. Welcome, Edward. Thank you.
Hi, Bruce. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for having this and doing this at this time of our lives. It's so important. It's probably the single most important thing that I've been trying to stay focused on in this entire COVID era.
Well, thank you. And for our viewers who, I don't think you need an introduction, but just briefly, Edward James Olmos has been a path-breaking actor, director, and producer. He's been in amazing films and TV programs: Zoot Suit, Blade Runner, Miami Vice, Ballad of Gregorio Cortez, Stand and Deliver, Time of the Butterflies, American Me, Selena, Battlestar Galactica, and more recently, Mayans MC. But he's also known as someone who is an activist and puts his talents to great causes. He's been a U.S. Goodwill Ambassador to UNICEF. He's been a national spokesperson for a variety of organizations: Southwest Voter Registration Project, the Juvenile Diabetes Association. He's been arrested and spent 20 days in jail in 1991 for taking part in protests against the U.S. Navy's bombings of the island of Vieques, off Puerto Rico. He's won awards for his peacekeeping efforts in the Los Angeles riots. He's been the executive producer of anti-domestic violence films. He's co-produced the Latino Book and Family Festival, and he's co-founder of the Los Angeles Latino International Film Festival. So again, Edward, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Bruce.
You've been a strong supporter of the farm worker movement for decades, but you didn't grow up in a farm worker background. What was your family upbringing like, and where are you from?
Yeah, we're originally from East Los Angeles. I'm first in Indiana. That was where I was born and raised. And my family, my father came here in 1945, and my mother was born here. She was a Chicana, Mexican-American, as I was, and I was the first Olmos on behalf of my father to be born here, even though I have an older brother, but he was born in Mexico City. So we were pretty much city people, but we did go out into the fields. We picked oranges, and it was a very interesting life in that respect, because we did work out in the orange fields, picking oranges. We also did, my family would, my aunts and uncles and all of the little guys, all of us little ones would clean buildings too at night. We'd go into the building areas, to the big high-rises in Los Angeles. And the little ones, I was maybe 3 years old, 4 years old, we would get the trash cans underneath the desks, and we'd go floor by floor. And the older ones would do all the cleaning and stuff that they had to do. But so we did migrant work in respects of out in the fields, and we also did. My father started off as working in the meat packing plants, which is really difficult. And then he finally moved himself into, as a welder. He learned how to be a welder, and he did that for 25 years till he almost lost his eyesight. And then he went on to work in the post office, that's where he finally lived. He worked there for about 22 years in the post office. And my mother was extraordinary. My mom was really a very, very eclectic human being. She was very strong, very powerful woman. And she was a sheriff. She had been a taxi cab driver before that. She had been worked in an electronics company before that, making electronic equipment and refined tool making is that's actually what she would do. And then she was also a nurse. She was a nurse for over 22 years. And she was the first one to go into the HIV ward at the County General Hospital when they put it in there in 1987, I think it was. She walked in there, and nobody else would go in, not even doctors. They had no idea what was going on and what this was about, and they were trying to get more information, but the patients were coming in. And so she was, when they put the ward up at the County General, she was the very first nurse to walk through the door and go into the ward. And she stayed there for, I think, 11 years, from 11 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning, 6 days a week for about 11 years. And she was quite a quite a force of nature, as we used to call it. She died, excuse me, she died a couple of years ago, 2018, and at the age of 92. So she had a very strong life, and she's set a very high standard and high bar for understanding life. And that's really where I come from. Those two people are the roots of it, as well as my great-grandparents, who were incredible also.
Well, she did have an eclectic background, and so do you. I read that you were a baseball player on a farm team for the major leagues, and you were a rock and roll musician before you went into acting.
Yeah, kind of. As a kid, I played the ball really well. I played it every day. That's one of the things where people don't really understand how anybody could do anything 7 days a week. And people, I was raised on that. I mean, we had to brush our teeth 7 days a week. Okay, we never got away with not brushing them. And the wonderful part of it is that friends of mine, especially, I had one friend who I've had since I was 6 years old, Jay Nomura, the Nomura family, had a strong aesthetic for work. They worked 7 days a week. They still do. Literally. I mean, you can't quite understand that until you realize that, yes, you do something every day, 7 days a week. But we learned how to do something that we love to do when we didn't feel like doing it. And that's what comes with this discipline, determination, perseverance, and patience that I found out about in playing the game of baseball. And I couldn't catch a ball when I barely started at the age of 5, 4.5, 5 years old. Throw a ball at me and he'd hit me in the face. But, I learned how to catch the ball, how to throw it, how to hit it. And pretty soon doing it every day, the 10,000 hour thing gets into play, and you do it for enough time. You get to be the best that you can be. It doesn't make you better than anybody else. It just makes you the best that you can be. And that's all we really try to do with our lives, and be the best that one can be. And so with that said, I got into baseball, and then at the age of 14, I took that aesthetic and those values, and I moved into the art form of singing and dancing and music, and rock and roll hit. I got into rock and roll in about 1955, 56 with the late Little Richard and James Brown, and there was quite a few incredible artists that were around at that period of time, with Robert Johnson and a lot of other incredible musicians that and artists that just made me go unbelievably out of my mind. The music, rock and roll music, was just incredible. So I started singing rock and roll, and I got into a rock and roll band, and then I started playing on the Sunset Strip, and I played at Gazzari's on the Sunset Strip for 4 years, 7 days a week. And we held the record there until Van Halen came in and beat us by 1 week. They stayed 4 years in 1 week. So they were there for a long time, and we were too. And before us, there was Redbone and Pat Lolly Vegas and before them there was, well, before them was The Doors. So that stage was used by a lot of great people and understanding, and a lot of people cut their teeth in, because we used to be able to play 7 days a week. I mean, today it's hard. I mean, you don't have nightclubs that will hire you and keep you there for long periods of time, so you can really perfect your craft. But yeah, from rock and roll, I went into theater in college. When I went to East LA Community College, I took an acting class my first year. So I was a freshman. And along with music and theater, it started to mold together. And then in 1978, I hit with Zoot Suit, and I was singing, dancing, acting, comedy, drama. All of it came together and clicked in. And from then it was all, it took off.
Well, so let's go back to just before Zoot Suit. You made this film. You were a young actor. You got a small role in this, but I think the film is amazing and still relevant. It's called Alan Brista, and it was done by the director Robert M. Young, who I know you've worked with a lot over the years. We tell our viewers about Alan Brista, what it's about, and why. I assume you still think it's relevant.
Yeah, that film is probably the most definitive film on the immigration of people from Latin America to the United States in view of the needs of themselves for their family. And it deals with a young man who goes looking for his father, who he hasn't seen since he was a little boy, and leaves his little town in Mexico and crosses illegally across the border. And he comes across and starts to learn and look for his father here in the United States of America, in California, and Stockton actually is where he ends up at. And it's a very powerful, powerful movie that is so well done that it's proclaimed one of the finest films of its kind ever made. And it really does give you the full aspect of understanding of what passion and commitment and understanding of one's life it takes to do what these people do. And it shows you the inside values of the people who have come here. And it's not, painted in roses, and, it's a very difficult journey. And it's beautifully done by a brilliant artist. Robert M. Young, I would say, is probably one of the most gifted filmmakers of the 20th century, 21st century still. He's still working, but he's 95 years old right now. We're still working on one of the projects that what I have to do is with him right now. And but he really was an extraordinary documentary filmmaker. He created, he was the first man to use documentary journalism on television. He did the first 4 NBC white papers back in the 1950s and into the 60s. And that's when they got into using extraordinary filmmaking in the field of documentation. And it was beautifully done. And he did great work, and he brought it up for television. It was like, he did the first 4 NBC white papers. And, but then he, due to some situations that he got involved with in respects of turning down going to China with the President Nixon. They wanted him to document it, and he said, they told him, you can't really shoot everything. We're going to have to check everything you're going to make. And he goes, well, I really don't work that way. I wish I could, but what I shoot is the reality of the moments, and I'll make my film. If you want me to come with you, I'll make my film. But and they said, well, thank you, but no thank you. So he stayed behind, and then they confiscated one of his films, and the government, along with the NBC, the last film he made, they confiscated it and burned the elements, because it dealt with Italian people living in Italy, in Palermo, Italy, in a little town in Palermo, and it showed the process of how the mafia works. And so they confiscated the film before it was released, and they destroyed the elements. And so with that, he went into making his own films. He couldn't stand it anymore. So he started, his first film he made was Nothing But a Man with Ivan Dixon and Abby Lincoln in 1964. And then he went on to make the Alambrista, but with the aesthetic that he had built up throughout his understanding of his life since the 30s. I think he made his first film in 1939, 38. Yeah, yeah, he made it for Adolf Zucker over at Paramount, and he was really amazing, amazing man. And he was at MIT at the age of 15, so he was kind of smart. And he ended up graduating after he went off to fight the war, and then when he came back, he graduated from Harvard. And so he was really a documentist, but he used the documentary filmmaking style to make and create dramatic film. And that's why Alambrista is so unbelievably strong and poignant. It deals with the migration of humanity. It deals with the understanding of working in the fields and the pain and the understanding of that pain, and the struggle that people go through to live. And he's a brilliant filmmaker, and I highly recommend that movie for everyone to watch. It's on DVD. You can get it on DVD. The Alambrista is the name of it. So that's the first one that I made with him. That's where I met him. That was in 1975 is when I met him. We went on to do the movie in 1976, and then it was released in 1977. It won the Palme d'Or. Matter of fact, they created the Palme d'Or in France at the film festival, Cannes Film Festival. They created that award around him. He was the reason that he received the first one, the first award that they gave out in that situation for the best first-time filmmaker. That was his representation of his first film that he wrote and directed, did it all his own.
And still relevant today. So,
Yeah.
So you went on to work with Luis Valdez, who created El Teatro Campesino. El Teatro Campesino was active in supporting Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and the striking farm workers in the fields. And he wrote the play, which eventually became a movie, Zoot Suit. You starred, you were the narrator, El Pachuco, in the play. It was in Los Angeles, and then it went to Broadway and later was made into a film. What was the social significance of El Teatro Campesino and Zoot Suit at the time?
Teatro Campesino is truly probably one of those prolific theater groups in the country. And it dealt with the farm worker. It came out of the farm worker movement. Luis Valdez had been going to school at San Jose State, graduated from there, and he teamed up with the farm workers movement because they were all campesinos themselves, and they were campesino children, and he grew up, got his education, and then used his craft and his art in a way that, man, just revolutionized the movement, the farm workers union movement. They would do their plays that he would write on back of steak bed trucks. When they'd take out the steaks and on the back of the bed of the truck, they would perform for the campesinos, the migrant workers, and their families, and in there was always a tremendous sense of understanding of what the struggle was and what they organized and helped unite the Farm Workers Union. They would entertain the people before Cesar would talk or after Cesar would talk, and Dolores Huerta would talk. Dolores and Cesar were just amazing human beings, and still are. I mean, both of them iconic in their development as people on this planet. And Luis was a central aspect of the artistic endeavor of bringing to light the plight of the migrant workers and the and the campesinos of this country, not only the Latino, but all. He was very diverse in his presentation of pieces of work, and it was amazing what he did. And with that, he went all around the world with his theater, his Teatro Campesino Theater. That was the name of it. And then he finally, one day, he had been working with Mark Taper for him and for many years, and they got together with Gordon Davidson and him got together, and they both created Zoot Suit. And it was a true story, I should say a factual story based in truth, that took place in 1943 during the Zoot Suit riots and during the Second World War. And it was a beautiful piece of work that there's a movie. They made it into a film. The play was unprecedented. It became probably the single most effective play of the year that it came out, and maybe of the decade, especially dealing with cultural dynamic. The culture, the Latino culture at that time had never really been presented on the main stages of the United States of America. And this was the very first play that really dealt with the cultural dynamic. I mean, you could say that South Pacific dealt with the Polynesians, and the West Side Story dealt with the Puerto Ricans, but it wasn't really culturally centered. It was more as a vehicle to use a story inside of that. This was totally culturally centered, and the play became, and is, the very first major piece of work done on Latinos in the United States of America in theater. And Luis Valdez wrote it, and brilliant piece of work. I mean, masterful at the highest level. And I think everybody that ever saw the play would agree. And they came from all over the world. It was, I mean, I can't tell you how impactful this piece of work was. It was 1978, going into 79. People were going through a lot of changes, and especially in the world. And here we were doing a play that dealt with Mexican Americans, Chicanos, during the Second World War, who were getting brutalized and beat up because of the way that they dressed by the military. And then were accused of, 18 of the boys were accused of killing one boy. And they tried them in a mass, all 18 at one time. And they put them all into San Quentin prison. They were ages 14 through 8. The oldest was 18, but there was only one. The rest were like 16, 15, 16, 14 years old. They were kids, and they put them all, but it caused an incredible amount of problems. They stayed in jail for 2 years. They finally got them out. They finally reprieved the sentence and got them out. But this movie really depicts the plight of the discrimination and prejudicisms of the period and of the culture. But yet it was a riveting story. And it was so dynamic the way he presented it and the way he stylized it. And they came from, I'll put it to you this way. 5 Kahali theater families came from India. 3 Kabuki theater families came from Japan. The entire Moscow theater, the entire theater, and the executive director and all of the actors came, and they came in 2 planes to see it, and they came from Russia. And the entire Royal Shakespearean Company came to see it. Everyone had to see it live. They had to, the word went out, and it just became like a magnet for theatrical groups had to see it, and they came. And boy, it was amazing. It was really, truly a gift that Luis Valdez should be thanked 1,000 times over. And the way that it related with the plight was a direct reflection on what he had been doing as Teatro Campesino throughout his entire experience, his life. and the way he presented it, the dynamic of how he staged it, and how the characters, and it was what he was doing. Some of the characters that he used on this play, he was using them in the fields during the 60s, the early 60s, late 60s and early 70s, while he was working with Cesar Chavez and the Farmworkers Union and Dolores Huerta and everybody. And so it was a real augmentation of life to the fullest in the world of theater, and people were so grateful. He's done brilliant work since then, but boy, was that a monumental piece of work. That piece of work, Alambrista, which you brought up, El Norte, which was another great piece of work that Gregory Nava did, were the usages of art that have become monumental. And most recently in the last 90s, is a troupe called Culture Clash, which have done extraordinary work in the cultural dynamic of the Latino in the United States of America, along with the incredible, can't forget the Latino Theater Center, with Jose Luis and Evelina Fernandez, who have created the theater group, Latino theater group, which is fantastic. And but that was the origins. The Zoot Suit really launched all of us. And so in 1978, when that came out, everything changed. And to this day, it's a stepping stone. And I think most people really realize that was a cultural call to arms of not only the Latino culture, but of all cultures. And that's the Asian American, the indigenous, the African American, of course. And it was amazing. I'm very grateful that I've been able to live throughout this period in time, because it's been amazing, especially right now. Right now, you talk about understanding the culture and the dynamic of what we're living in right now. When I started to hear first responders being thanked, all the nurses, all the doctors, all the hospitals, all the people shelving the stores with the food, and I started hearing, and I didn't hear one person say thank you to the person who was actually out there getting the food for us and giving it to the truck so that they could put them into the stores. I mean, without those people, you got nothing, absolutely nothing. Without these people, the migrant workers and campesinos, you have nothing to eat, absolutely nothing. If this country was ever to be, there was a great movie made, A Day Without a Mexican, by Sergio Arau, and a brilliant piece of work. Which, what happens is one day the whole world wakes up in the United States of America, and there are no Mexicans in the United States. Oh well, Hey, where's our gardener? Hey, has anybody seen the housekeeper? Hey, where's the babysitter? Hey, how come I can't get my car washed? What's going on with and now all of a sudden they realize that they have not only the help that they lose, but they start losing doctors, they start losing lawyers, they start losing educated people, and then made a big difference in the community. And so with the combination of that, with the loss of food, they can't buy a tomato. And then when they want to buy an onion, it costs you $35 for an onion, because there's a guy, they only have 12 of them because nobody would go out and pick them. It's very, very difficult to understand until one really focuses in, and that's why I love what you guys are doing, Bruce, is that you're focusing in on really, for me, the primary caretakers of us, the food chain. You can't get it into the stores unless you get it out of the field. So as far as I'm concerned, the most important aspect of the food chain is the person who takes it from the ground, from the earth, and gives it to the person who drives it to the store.
And you've been active and supportive of the Farmworker movement for decades. What originally caused you to get involved with the Farmworker movement?
It was pretty much a necessity of life, because without us supporting the movement, the farm worker, like I said, again, these are the people who create and give us our substance. We live off of their labor. Impossible for us to live without their labor. Impossible. And I will say that we dominate. Over 90%, 93% of the people who work in the fields are Latino. Then you get into there's Filipino, and there's other cultures that go into the fields, but it's not work that anybody likes to do for a long period of time. So we've been able to, I got involved because I was in the 60s. You got to remember, in 1960s, we were singing rock and roll. We were going crazy. And right in the middle of all of this was the Chicano movement. It took off. And I was a Chicano, and I was on stage, and so I became very aware of who I was. And it became very, very interesting to see. We worked with Cesar in the 70s, early 70s, and the Chicano moratorium hit, and then we lost a lot of great heroes during that period of time, and in the 60s going in the 70s. And one of the centerpieces of the whole thing was the Farm Workers Union. They were the center of the culture. So everyone was involved. I mean, the moratorium was huge. It took every single, the walkouts came in 1968. I made the movie about the walkouts from the schools. And it was if you haven't seen that movie, it brings you right into the focus of understanding and clarity in understanding the difficulties of the culture, the Latino culture in the United States of America, and especially the Mexican American, because I think we're about 80% of the Latino culture in the United States of America are Mexican.
And so you've been involved with farm workers for decades. Until we got to the pandemic, I just wanted to know your perception of whether you think things had changed in the last few years, at all for the better for farm workers, with that long view you have.
It's been such a difficult journey, and the steps have been so small and very direct. I mean, getting from the point of being able to give them water on the field in the 40s and 50s, to being able to give them a long hoe rather than the short hoe to do their work, so they didn't have to be bent over all the time. That took decades. And to this day, I mean, we just got bathrooms in being, accommodations for bathrooms now because of the union. The union was the key. The organization that Dolores did and that Cesar did was monumental. That changed the course of the history of their voice, of the people, of the campesinos. It was just very, very, very directly related to the work that Dolores and Cesar did, bar none, and that the whole union has been doing now for decades. And I will say that, today we're talking about them as if they don't even exist. Why do you think we're doing this? And I'm so grateful for you doing this. No one has mentioned, the President of the United States has never mentioned it. No, you sit there and you listen to the news. You in passing, they might say something about the campesinos that are working in the field, but just in passing, no one has focused in to thank them like they thanked the nurses, the doctors, the police department, the fire department, the grocers, and the people who stack our shelves get more thank you than the campesino. And to me, that's where we're at right now. It's no joke. It's 2020, and we still don't give. Why? Because, hey, they don't have papers? I don't need no stinking papers to say thank you to someone who says to me, it does something for me and my family. And so I say to everyone that's listening to us today, say thank you to the campesino from now until the end of the pandemic, because without them, you would have no food on your table.
Thanks, and we'll keep advocating, for access to hand washing facilities and sick pay and access to health
No, they
care.
don't have any of that.
Yeah.
They're not getting any of that. Yeah, you bring that out because that's really truly the truth of living. They don't get sick pay. They're not getting any kind of handouts. They're campesinos. It gets emotional, very difficult to take, because you realize, hey, wait a minute, that guy's right. I mean, without them, we wouldn't have a tomato, we wouldn't have lettuce, we wouldn't have carrots, we wouldn't have all of our fruits, we wouldn't have all of our vegetables, we wouldn't. Gosh almighty, whew, I just realized, and they get nothing.
Well, I guess one question I have for you is, what else do we need to do? What are the most important things to do to take advantage, really, of the acknowledgement by governments that farm workers are essential and that they work in an essential industry and that they need to continue to work? How can we, in the long run, turn that to farm workers' benefit, to empower them to change things?
It comes through the voice. We have to speak about them. We have to talk about them. We have to feel for them. We have to put them in the front burner and understand that they have to be understood and thanked. Thanked, not because, or they're condemned right now. They're condemned. Are you kidding? With the government that we have right now, it's very difficult, very, very difficult to say thank you to migrant workers and, campesinos. Very difficult. I don't think they've ever said thank you to them. It took the empathy that comes from this government is non-existent, and the problem starts at the top. So as far as I'm concerned, we need to change the top. We need Biden instead of Trump.
Well, we're a nonpartisan, non-electoral
group.
We focus on policy, but you're entitled to your opinion.
I'm entitled to my opinion.
and to say it.
Yeah.
But before I ask you my last question, I just want to say to our viewers that we do have a wealth of information on our website, farmworkerjustice.org, about COVID-19, about immigration reform, about labor rights, about occupational safety, including around pesticides, around access to healthcare, around corporate responsibility. And we work with a few companies that are actually trying to do the right thing and willing to talk to groups like us in the United Farm Workers Union, other farm worker groups. So I do encourage people to take a look at our website. We do this work at no charge to farm workers, so we hope people will make a donation on our website, farmworkerjustice.org, or mail a donation to our office in Washington, D.C. So my last question to you is, what are you working on now? What can we look forward to coming up?
Oh, well, we're working on MC, Mayans MC, which is a television series that we've been doing for the last 2 years. We're on hiatus right now because of the pandemic, but we'll go back into that. And I'm doing some films, trying to get some films out. We have one that's coming out called Devil Has a Name. And then there's another one that's coming out that's out right now. Matter of fact, it's out right now. It's called Windows on the World, which is quite an interesting film. I love it. My son directed it. I helped produce it. And it's a wonderful piece of work that deals with a family whose patriarch, the father goes to the United States and works in the United States from Monterrey, Mexico. And he's working in the Twin Towers when the Twin Towers go down. And the family is devastated. And 3 weeks after the 9/11 event that took place in the collapse of the Twin Towers, the mother, who's obsessed with, just can't get over it. She's completely devastated by the realities. No one says anything to them because all the people that were working in those buildings, that were not documented were not documented. And their families were never informed of anything, and they couldn't get any kind of help, or no one, they were just left out. And there were hundreds of them working in those buildings. And my character is one of the people who was working there. And my youngest son, who's 27, comes to the United States to look for the last remains of anything that he had, and tried to find him. And she tells his mother, I'll look for him. If he's there, I'll find him. If he's not, I'll bring back whatever we can. And so he goes, and that is the story. The story is him going to New York and having to deal with the realities of what he hits trying to find his father. And it's a really emotionally beautiful movie, I must say. I'm very grateful. And it's called Windows on the World, because he worked as a maintenance worker in the restaurant of Windows on the World, which is the restaurant that was at the top of one of the Twin Towers. So it's a beautiful film. So that one's out right now, and you can see it. It's on VIB, I think it's called. That's the streaming. It's a Latino streaming center, but anybody can go on it. It's in English and Spanish, so you can see it. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful movie. And then I have another one. Yeah, I have another one coming. So I have Windows on the World. I have Devil Has a Name. I have also coming out is Monday Nights at 7, which is a love story. Beautiful, beautiful story. That'll be streaming. You'll find it. And then I had, coming up is, can't forget this one's called Walking with Herb, H-E-R-B. Herb, Walking with Herb is not out yet. It won't be out for, I guess, a little while. But it's with George Lopez and myself. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, intimate story about finding one's faith in oneself. And George is phenomenal. He's breathtaking.
Oh, great.
So funny. It's
great. Well,
it's dramatic too. It's not just a bundle of jokes. It's really a dramatic piece of work that is beautifully done. Walking with Herb. So I have those 4 films coming out and that are out.
Oh, great. Well, we'll look for all of them. Yeah, thank you. I forgot to mention earlier that some of your old colleagues from El Teatro Campesino and other efforts have become involved in the last few years with Farmworker Justice. Pepe Serna, Enrique Castillo, and Bill Hernandez, Alma Martinez, a number of people that go way back with you, and we've been very fortunate to have them involved.
All my closest and dearest friends. We've been together since the 70s. So it's been now decades. It's amazing how it went by pretty fast, Bruce, I must say. It went by pretty fast. I know I look good.
Does.
Hey, I'm 73, man. Yeah, I made it.
Yeah, you look great. All right, well, thanks again, Edward James Olmos. We really appreciate you spending time with us for this important issue of farm workers and in the era of COVID-19.
I want to say my love to all those that have lost family, friends, relatives inside of this epidemic. I've lost, my family has lost family members, and it's been very difficult. And so I say to all of us, we will get through this, and we will be better for it at the other end. We'll know how to be better to one another and kinder to one another. And so bless your hearts. Thank you very much for watching, and please donate to the farmworkersjustice.org. Please, we can use your help 1,000 times over. And thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Edward.